Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are undertaking something really extraordinary.
I think so.
We're not just studying a historical figure. We're going to try and literally peer into the private internal monologue of one of the most powerful men who ever lived.
The Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius Antoninus.
Exactly.
And it truly is an unparalleled artifact. We're diving into his private notes, what we now call the Meditations.
But that's not even what he called it, right?
No, not at all. A more accurate title is just Thoughts.
Oh.
And the key difference here, the thing you have to hold in your head the whole time, is that this was never meant for publication.
Never.
This is a stack of personal memos. A journal, really, written by an emperor, for the emperor, and for the brutal, demanding purpose of self-guidance, moral training, internal discipline.
That distinction is everything. It changes how you read it completely.
It does.
So this deep dive is, in a way, your shortcut to understanding the core operating system of Stoicism, but filtered through the mind of a ruler who commanded an empire that spanned, well, the known world. I mean, from the sands of the Euphrates all the way to the Atlantic
The
coast.
scale is just immense.
And our mission, really, is to extract the essential philosophical nuggets, the key takeaways that are just as vital for managing, modern anxiety and decision-making as they were for governing Rome in a time of plague and war.
And if we want to understand the man and the philosophy, we have to start right where he started,
Book 1.
with the stunning modesty of Book 1. I mean, before we get to his maxims on death or duty or the cosmos, Marcus provides what is essentially a public declaration of debt, a thorough gratitude list.
It's maybe the most striking part of the whole work, in a way.
It really is. It demonstrates his character right from the jump.
It's absolutely phenomenal. I mean, think about it. If you pick up the autobiography of any other powerful figure, ancient or modern, what do you expect?
Bombastic claims. I was born for greatness,
Ah.
Epic military victories, grand decrees.
Right. Instead, Marcus dedicates this entire first section to methodically thanking his family, his tutors, his kinsmen, and he focuses almost entirely on the specific moral character traits he absorbed from them.
It shows you what he valued most.
What's inside?
Internal constitution, not external achievement.
Yeah.
He starts with his grandfather Verus, praising his good morals and the government of his temper.
With the government of his temper. I love that. Temper! The ability to control your own emotional response.
Exactly. Then from his father's reputation, he says he gained modesty and a manly character. These are the very first things he notes. Not wealth, not political savvy.
And he immediately moves on to his mother. He credits her with teaching him piety and beneficence and abstinence, not only from evil deeds, but even from evil thoughts.
Even from the thoughts. That's a high bar.
A very high bar. But the part that hits hardest, especially given his eventual status, is that she taught him simplicity in my way of living, far removed from the habits of the rich.
Just think about that. Here is the future master of the world, detailing how his mother prepared him to reject luxury before he had any of it.
It's incredible.
And that thread of discipline, it just runs throughout his entire formative years. He talks about his governor,
Right.
from whom he learned endurance of labor, and to want little, and to work with my own hands, and not to meddle with other people's affairs.
That combination, the physical endurance and the mental restraint, that's Stoic training in a nutshell.
It is. It's all about building an internal resilience that doesn't rely on comfort or external validation.
And crucially, this first book, it reveals the philosophical lineage that would end up governing his entire life.
Yes.
He thanks his most important teacher, Rusticus, for giving him the impression that his character needed improvement and discipline.
Which is a hard thing to hear, I imagine.
Especially for a future emperor. But more specifically, he thanks Rusticus for the introduction to the core texts of the philosophy he would later embody. He says Rusticus gave him the discourses of Epictetus, which he communicated to me out of his own collection.
And this connection is so profound, you have to pause on this. Epictetus was a former slave who achieved total intellectual freedom through philosophy.
Right, the lowest rung of the social ladder.
And Marcus Aurelius was the ultimate emperor, holding all the temporal freedom and power you could imagine.
The very top.
Yet both of them found their moral compass in the exact same set of ideas. It just establishes the principle right away that whether you're at the bottom of the social hierarchy or the very top,
The work is the same.
the path to a rational, good life requires the same commitment to inner discipline.
Exactly. So that establishes his character. But now, to truly appreciate the demands of that discipline, we need to understand the immense, often horrifying, external pressure he was operating under.
Yes.
Which brings us to the context of the philosopher-emperor.
His education really was unparalleled. The biographical sketch shows that once he was adopted by Antoninus Pius, basically designated as heir by Hadrian, his upbringing became this comprehensive thing. It merged academic rigor with practical statecraft.
And at only 11 years old, he makes this definitive, almost shocking shift toward philosophy.
It's not like he just casually started reading Plato either.
No, he went all in. He assumed the dress of philosophers, something plain and coarse, and became a hard student, lived a most laborious, abstemious life, even to the point where it supposedly injured his health.
He abandoned the traditional Roman focus on poetry and rhetoric.
It's fancy stuff.
Yeah, the stuff for public performance. And he traded it for the harsh practicality of Stoic philosophy. Just try to imagine an 11-year-old heir to the throne deciding, you know what, I'm done with frivolous luxury.
I'm going to voluntarily subject myself to physical hardship.
In the name of moral training. It's incredible.
But importantly, this wasn't just abstract study, was it?
Not at all. He also studied law, which was a necessary preparation for administration and governance. And he learned the Roman discipline of arms. He had to.
Because he was destined not just to philosophize in a room somewhere, but to lead legions and command vast territories.
He was preparing to be a practical king, not a contemplative hermit.
And that contrast, that leads us to the true burden of the purple, the sheer weight of his job. Marcus ruled an immense territory. We're talking maybe 120 million people, from the scorching deserts of the East to the misty shores of Britain.
And when you're reading these thoughts, you have to remember, he was not writing them in a quiet, peaceful villa.
No.
He was writing these intimate, sometimes desperate pleas for self-control and clarity amidst just immense stress.
We know the exact conditions, which is chilling. There's a note at the end of Book I that often gets overlooked.
It says, among the Quadi at the Granua.
So what does that mean?
It means he was on a military campaign. The Marcomannic Wars, a brutal, grinding series of conflicts against powerful barbarian tribes on the northern frontier. He was literally camping on the banks of a river in Central Europe, dealing with the realities of the battlefield and writing these deep philosophical ruminations.
At night, in his tent.
Probably.
And the wars were only part of it.
Oh, not even close. Back home, the empire was being ravaged by the Antonine Plague.
Likely smallpox.
Yes. And it decimated the population, the legions. It may have killed millions of people. So he's battling war on the frontier, a terrifying pestilence at home, political conspiracy.
There was always a conspiracy.
And administrative corruption back in Rome. He was a practical moralist, living under the kind of systemic existential pressure that, honestly, few leaders in history have ever faced.
That context is just so crucial for us as modern readers. When he writes about enduring pain or focusing on duty,
They're not theorizing.
he's speaking from direct, brutal experience. The sources note that despite his high station, he lived as frugally and temperately as the poorest philosopher, and he'd do it through disciplined choices. He needed all his fortitude just to support the weight of his responsibilities.
Right.
Now, we absolutely have to address the most complex and troubling historical point of his reign. The paradox of this profoundly benevolent philosopher who allowed, or at least failed to stop, the persecution of Christians.
This is a necessary piece of the puzzle. It's historical complexity, and it requires us to analyze the legal situation he inherited, not just the personal philosophy he practiced.
So this wasn't something he started.
No, the roots of the persecution went back over a century, specifically to a ruling by the Emperor Trajan, Trajan's rescript.
And what did that decree establish?
It was a difficult compromise. Trajan stated that Christians should be punished, but no search must be made after the Christians.
So don't go looking for them.
Don't hunt them down. But if someone was charged and convicted of this new religion, they could be spared if they affirmed they were not a Christian and showed reverence to the Roman gods.
So if they recanted, they lived. If they stood firm in their faith, they were punished.
Yes, which means, essentially, they weren't technically being punished for the belief in a divine figure, but for what the Romans saw as invincible obstinacy.
Their refusal to comply with state requirements.
Exactly. That included paying homage to the Roman gods, which was seen as a civic duty, something that upheld Roman state religion, and therefore stability.
They were seen as a threat to the state.
Precisely. Hostile to the Roman way. You have to remember the Roman religion was highly syncretic. It tolerated all other forms of superstition, provided they didn't interfere with the public rights necessary for state safety.
And the Christians were different.
Very different. They rejected all heathen rites and declared all other religions false. From Marcus's perspective, this made them seem dangerous to the state.
And the reality of this policy played out horrifically. I mean, we look at the Lyum persecution in AD 177. Roman citizens were beheaded, others were exposed to beasts in the arena, and this was based on imperial rescripts.
And the source is careful to be impartial here. Marcus was operating under established constitutional precedents. There was also immense popular pressure. The populace often viewed Christians as atheists and scapegoated them during times of plague or disaster.
So the mob could turn on them.
Yes, and it is certain that, under Antoninus's rule, men were put to death because they were Christians. But the sources also confirm that Marcus did not derive any of his ethical principles from Christianity, a religion of which he knew nothing.
He was a product of his time, of his own philosophical tradition.
Right. He was constrained by the legal and religious frameworks he was sworn to uphold, even if it might have conflicted with his internal sense of benevolence.
It's a powerful reminder that philosophy, no matter how pure, has to contend with the often ugly realities of governance and history. He was a product of the Stoic tradition, and that limited his ability to conceive of a social order outside that Roman religious framework.
Definitely.
So, given that constraint, given that he was forced to participate in some of the horrors of his time, how did he avoid becoming consumed by that darkness?
Well, the answer lies entirely in the philosophical bedrock he built for himself.
Which brings us to section 2, the pure philosophy, the foundation of universal nature, reason, and duty. And this is where it gets really interesting.
It really is. We have to start with the Stoic worldview, what they called physic. Marcus constantly refers to the universe, the cosmos. And for him, it's not a random void. It's not a chaos of accidental events.
It's what?
It's an ordered, rational, living being having one substance and one soul. If you want to understand Stoicism, you have to first accept this premise. The entire system is designed and is operating with purpose.
And he calls this pervasive governing force reason.
Yes. He posits that this reason, which governs everything, has in itself no cause for doing evil, for it has no malice, nor does it do anything ignorantly.
So the universe itself is good.
Or at least not malicious. Therefore, everything that happens, even the hard things, the terrible things, is made and perfected according to this rational principle.
And this leads directly to a core idea of radical interconnectedness.
Absolutely. All things are implicated with one another, and all in this way are friendly to one another. They form a single, harmonious unit.
Like an organism.
That's the perfect analogy. Don't think of it as a pile of stones, but as a biological organism. When you accept the universe as a rational, interconnected whole, you start to realize that nothing happens outside of nature's design. It dictates the very environment of our existence.
So if that's the universe, what does that mean for us as individuals? That moves us into ethic, man's nature and purpose.
And man is fundamentally defined as a rational and social animal.
Both of those things are key, rational and social.
They are. The entire purpose of Stoic philosophy is to live conformably to nature, not just the physical environment, but universal nature, which is reason. Our highest faculty is our rational faculty, and this faculty demands that reason should govern all the rest.
It's our specific function.
It's our job, like flight for a bird or flowing for a river. Our job is to be rational.
And this internal governing principle is what Marcus refers to as the demon within. You sometimes hear it called the hegemonikon in Greek Stoicism, the ruling faculty.
That's right. The hegemonikon is the seat of your judgment, your choice, your assent. It's the CEO of your mind.
And Marcus describes this inner ruling part of the soul as a portion of the divinity.
This isn't just, fluffy spiritual language.
Yeah.
This is a heavy philosophical claim. If the universe is governed by reason or divinity, and our inner ruling faculty is a portion of that divinity.
And our personal responsibility is absolute.
It is. So the key is reverence. You must reverence this demon by keeping it pure from passion and thoughtlessness and dissatisfaction with what comes from gods and men.
So if we fail in that duty, if we act irrationally or unjustly, we're not just disappointing ourselves.
No, you are failing the universal reason of which you are a part.
That accountability is the engine of Stoic duty, isn't it?
Is everything.
Yeah.
Marcus says he does what his nature wills him to do because his nature is rational and social. And since he is Antoninus, His political city is Rome, but since he is a man, his country is the world, the cosmos.
This idea of universal citizenship is crucial for defining our prime principle, which is justice and duty. If we are citizens of the world, then our duty is defined by contribution, not just self-interest. Marcus defines the central duty of his existence so simply, so elegantly, to act justly in what I now do and to be content with what is allotted to me.
That balances everything. Active justice, what is in our control, and passive acceptance, what is not in our control, the allotment.
He illustrates the social duty perfectly with one of the most famous analogies in the Meditations.
The bee in the hive.
Yes. If a thing is not good for the hive, it is not good for the bee.
The hive is society. The bee is the rational animal.
Exactly. Society, the hive, is the necessary good for the rational animal, the bee. Our function is social. To act justly is to act socially, for the common good.
And if your every act aligns with that rational social purpose, then you are living conformably to nature, and therefore you are living well. This foundation basically gives him permission to discard everything else.
And discarding the non-essential. That is what modern practitioners are most desperate for guidance on.
I think so.
How do we take this foundation and build that inner fortress that protects us from anxiety, distraction, and digital overload? Let's move to section 3 and discuss the practical tools Marcus used to manage his own mind and his perceptions.
The first, and honestly the most important actionable takeaway, is the absolute control of the mind. It's often summarized as, opinion is all.
This is the core psychological mechanic of Stoicism.
It is. Marcus states it plainly. Nothing external touches the soul. Things remain immovable outside us. Our distress comes entirely from our judgments and opinions about events.
This is such a radical declaration, especially considering the literal existential threats he was facing. A plague is not neutral. A betrayal is not neutral. A war is not neutral.
Yes, saying they are. It's the judgment, the story we tell ourselves about the event, the story that says, this is a catastrophe, this is unfair, this is intolerable. That is what causes the suffering, not the event itself.
So the technique involves recognizing the impression, the initial flash of feeling, and then immediately withdrawing your assent to it.
Right. He tells himself to treat impressions like chalk on a board. He says to wipe out troubling impressions as easily as wiping a sponge or applying a plaster.
So that ruling faculty, the hegemonicon, has the power to just refuse to endorse the negative judgment.
Yes.
Can you give us a specific example of how that works in practice? Because that sounds incredibly hard when you get a piece of truly bad news.
Sure. Let's say you receive an unfair criticism at work. Or maybe someone lies about you. The external event is just the sound of the words or the sight of the email. The immediate impression, the fantasia, is I am insulted or I am wronged. Marcus's command is to halt the process right there. Do not assent to the impression that this is an injury.
So what do you do instead?
You apply a new judgment. You tell yourself this is merely a person uttering words based on their mistaken opinion of good and evil. You strip the event of its moral weight.
By stripping it of our moral judgment, it becomes just an indifferent external fact.
Exactly. The body may feel pain or others may slander him, but that pain or slander cannot injure the ruling faculty unless the mind judges it so. This technique allows him to maintain this incredible psychological distance from his own suffering and from the irrationality of others.
This is the inner fortress.
That's it. Nothing that happens outside the walls can harm the general within.
And once you master that, the next logical application is to see the futility of all these external pursuits.
Right.
If the only thing that matters is the purity of the inner judgment, then what happens to the major goals of a non-Stoic life? Fame, riches, pleasure.
Marcus dismisses them all with this brutal clinical economy. And his favorite tool for doing it is time perspective.
He calls fame vapory, contemptible, and a thing devoid of judgment.
He sees posthumous fame as merely a sound and echo. He asks us, why worry about the opinion of others who will soon die and be forgotten themselves?
This is such a powerful counter to the modern obsession with legacy, with social media validation. Marcus asks, I have often wondered how it is that every man loves himself more than all the rest of men, and yet sets less value on his own opinion of himself than on the opinion of others.
It's a great question. Why are we so desperate for external approval when we know our own intentions better than anyone else?
He reinforces this contempt for fame using mementos mori, the contemplation of mortality.
He specifically urges us to visualize how quickly great men, Alexander the Great, Pompeius, Caesar, and even great cities, Pompeii, Herculaneum, just vanish into oblivion.
All that remains of those who have shone in a wondrous way is a mere tale.
And complete oblivion soon buries them.
This visualization, it isn't meant to be morbid. It's clarifying.
It is. If the legacy of Alexander the Great is basically dust and a footnote in a history book, why should I spend my precious present moment worrying about what a handful of fleeting strangers think of my performance today?
That's the heart of it. Time washes away all memory. Therefore, the only thing that matters is the moral quality of your present action.
Exactly.
He also tackled pleasure directly, positioning it against virtue and moral control. He concludes that pleasure is neither good nor useful, and pursuing it as good leads to impiety. He uses an analysis from an earlier Stoic, Theophrastus, to compare offenses committed through desire versus those committed through anger.
And this distinction is really crucial for understanding Stoic morality. The source notes that offenses through desire acts motivated by greed or lust or the pursuit of luxury are more blamable.
Why? I think intuitively we often feel anger is worse because it's more violent.
Because anger is often a reaction. It's compelled by pain or a perceived injustice. It's a contraction of the soul. Desire, however, involves being overpowered by pleasure. The hegemonicon willfully abandons its post to pursue something known to be unnecessary or harmful. This seems, and he uses the language of the time, more intemperate and more womanish, meaning lacking in rational, manly control.
So the offense committed with pleasure is a greater failure of the rational faculty than one committed through the temporary haze of pain or anger.
Right. Someone acting out of spite is seen as less morally culpable than someone acting out of greed, because the person motivated by greed has deliberately chosen to corrupt their internal judgment for superficial gain. The Stoic has to operate from a place of firm, rational control, which is the opposite of being overpowered by sensual pleasure.
Absolutely. And achieving that firm control brings us to actionable takeaway number 2. Focus on the present point.
The practical tool for managing temporal anxieties. Regret for the past, worry for the future.
Marcus reminds himself that life is an indivisible point. The past is gone, the future is uncertain. We so often feel overwhelmed by the span of our lives or our to-do list, but he just grounds you instantly.
And his logic is airtight. He says, no man loses any other life than the one he is now living, and no man lives any other than the one he is now losing.
Right.
The longest life and the shortest life are brought to the same. The loss is always limited to the present moment, because you cannot lose what you do not have.
The past is already done. The future may never arrive.
You only have now.
That is profound. If you are worried about a meeting next week, you are suffering over something that literally does not exist in the present moment. We must live the present only. The focus has to be immediate, practical, and grounded in duty.
Which leads us beautifully into the third practical tool, the morning call to duty.
This is a famous passage. It directly addresses the listeners and his own inertia. That desire to stay in the warmth and comfort of bed when the world is calling. When rising unwillingly, he commands himself to perform this internal dialogue. I am rising to the work of a human being.
Why am I dissatisfied? I am going to do the things for which I exist, to act like a rational social creature.
And then he uses nature as his moral compass. He urges this kind of self-observation, almost self-shaming, by comparing himself to the rest of the ordered world.
He says, dost thou not see the little plants, the little birds, the ants, the spiders, the bees, working together to put in order their several parts of the universe? And art thou unwilling to do the work of a human being? And dost thou not make haste to do that which is according to thy nature?
It's a simple appeal to logic. If the entire cosmos is cooperating, and if my internal hegemonicon is part of that divine reason, then my natural function is exertion and contribution. If I resist that, I am actively resisting nature itself.
The message is crystal clear. Rational man is made for cooperation and exertion. If plants and animals fulfill their purpose automatically, it's a cosmic embarrassment for the rational soul, the demon within, to be the first to give way.
This is the philosophical foundation for getting out of bed every single day.
Regardless of the burden of the purple.
The entire system of the inner fortress controlling judgment, ignoring external pursuits, focusing on the present duty, it's all designed to make him impervious to the chaos of the outside world.
Exactly.
So now that we've established that internal control, how does this highly disciplined philosophical emperor deal with the often messy, irrational world of other people? Let's turn outward to section 4, the social contract, and specifically the difficult art of dealing with wrongdoers.
The guiding principle is immediate. And it's based on that universal nature we just discussed, the principle of cooperation.
Right.
Marcus sees humanity as fundamentally interconnected. We are designed by nature to function together. We are made for one another, like feet, like hands, like eyelids, like the rows of the upper and lower teeth.
So if you use your hands to scratch out your eyes, you're acting against yourself.
Precisely. To act against one another, then, is contrary to nature, and it is acting against one another to be vexed and to turn away. This is a moral command to participate in society, even when it's difficult.
But here's the major challenge. What does this all mean when someone cuts you off in traffic? Or worse, betrays you in a political conspiracy, which Marcus faced constantly? How should we respond to those who vex or injure us?
And this is where his morning meditation becomes a vital tool. He preemptively reminds himself that he will meet with difficult people.
He prepares himself.
He says, I shall meet with the busybody, the ungrateful, arrogant, deceitful, envious, unsocial.
And then comes the pivot.
This is the pivot point. Instead of reacting emotionally, he immediately follows up with the intellectual premise. All these things happen to them by reason of their ignorance of what is good and evil.
Ignorance. That is the core difference between the Stoic and the victim. They're not acting maliciously in your framework. They are simply mistaken.
Exactly. Marcus believed that every soul is involuntarily deprived of truth and consequently deprived of justice and benevolence. Nobody wills to hurt themselves, and since injustice is a harm to the soul, everyone who acts unjustly is doing so out of a fundamental misunderstanding of their own true good.
So when a man does wrong, we must immediately consider why. What erroneous opinion of good or evil compelled him?
And this insight leads directly to pity and pardon, not anger or vengeance, because if they knew better, they would do better.
This concept is incredibly difficult, and that's why it's reserved for the highest philosophical training. It allows the emperor to maintain his inner fortress while dealing with external malice.
Because if you descend to their level of anger or injustice, you have hurt your own ruling faculty more than they ever could.
Which gives us that powerful maxim for dealing with conflict. The best way of avenging thyself is not to become like the wrongdoer.
The only true harm they can inflict is to tempt you into abandoning your own virtue.
So instead of being angry, we must cultivate benevolence.
Yes. It is described as peculiar to man to love even those who do wrong. We should try to instruct them kindly and show them their error without anger. If we can't correct them,
Then we bear with them.
we must bear with them, remembering that the gods are also indulgent.
He's incredibly clear that hatred, which separates us from our kin, is fundamentally self-destructive. A man who hates and turns away from his neighbor separates himself from the whole social system, like a branch cut off from the tree.
We are made for cooperation. Isolation is contrary to man's nature.
And finally, the philosophy insists that social acts must be performed without expectation. This is perhaps the hardest lesson for the modern world, which often operates on a system of transactional favors and reciprocal praise. The analogy he uses for this is one of my favorites, drawn directly from nature. Do a good act like a vine producing grapes without calling out for others to see. Do not expect praise or return for the service.
The reward must be the act itself. The vine doesn't look for thanks, the horse doesn't look for applause after a race, the bee doesn't demand praise after making honey.
Seeking a third thing, reputation, applause, repayment, a public thank you, is what fools do.
True virtue, the rational act, is its own reward. Seeking anything external compromises its purity and moves it outside the control of the ruling faculty.
That's a profound way to define integrity. Doing the good simply because it's the rational, natural thing to do, not because of what it gets you.
Yes.
We have discussed character, duty, internal control, and social ethics. As we move into our final section, Section 5, Marcus turns his attention to the great inevitable forces of life: time, change, death, and acceptance.
The ultimate test of the Stoic mindset.
He constantly reviews the cyclical nature of the universe. He accepts that all things take place by change, and the nature of the universe loves nothing so much as to change the things which are and to make new things like them.
There is a continuous renewal of the world through flux.
Change, therefore, is not an evil.
It's according to nature, uses the analogy of elements. The death of earth is to become water, and the death of water is to become air, and the death of air is to become fire, and reversely.
Everything that exists is in a manner the seed of that which will be.
So if we resist change, we're resisting the very mechanism of the cosmos.
If we're part of this cosmic flux, then death is merely a natural event, like generation.
Yes. And he defines death so clinically, stripping it of all melodrama. He calls it a cessation of the impressions through the senses, and of the pulling of the strings which move the appetites, and of the discursive movements of the thoughts, and of the service to the flesh.
It's just a process.
That's a process.
And to develop a healthy contempt for the fear of death, not recklessness, but contempt for the anxiety around it, he urges us to observe how ephemeral and worthless human things are.
His description of the physical body is famously blunt, designed to shatter our vanity. Yesterday, a little mucus, tomorrow a mummy or ashes.
He details how many great figures, physicians, astrologers, heroes, tyrants, have all died. He notes that the longest liver and the shortest liver lose just the same, the present moment.
And he asks, in this infinity then, what is the difference between him who lives 3 days and him who lives 3 generations?
The answer is, philosophically, nothing. Because the only thing you ever possessed was the now.
Right.
And he offers that potent analogy of the smoky house. This is so vital for modern life, especially when dealing with toxic situations, a bad job, a difficult relationship.
An intolerable public life, perhaps?
Yes. The analogy is simple yet profound. If the house is smoky, if circumstances become intolerable and obstruct your ability to live rationally, you depart contentedly, as if thou wert suffering no harm.
The smoke is the external difficulty. If it makes it impossible for your ruling faculty to function, you leave.
But the key distinction is this. So long as nothing compels me out, I remain, am free, and no man shall hinder me from doing what I choose. And I choose to do what is according to the nature of the rational and social animal.
Death is the ultimate indifferent external event, reserved for the moment nature fixes. Until that moment, I am free to be virtuous.
This calm acceptance of destiny, which the Stoics call amor fati, the love of fate, is the highest form of trust in universal nature.
You must adapt thyself to the things with which thy lot has been cast. We're told to be content with the amount of substance assigned to us and the time assigned to us.
He says we shouldn't be dissatisfied that we only weigh so many pounds, so why be dissatisfied that we only live so many years?
It's the same logic.
It all comes back to aligning the self with what is rational and natural. And this brings us to the final, comprehensive, actionable takeaway: the 4 cardinal virtues. The pillars of a good life.
The philosophical summary reminds us that virtue is a unified whole, but for practical application, we categorize it into 4 chief virtues. Each has its own sphere of action: wisdom, justice, fortitude, and temperance. These are the non-negotiables.
Okay, let's start with wisdom, or sometimes called prudence. What does Marcus mean by this, beyond just being smart?
Stoic wisdom is the knowledge of what is truly good, what is truly evil, and what is indifferent. It's not about acquiring academic knowledge. It's about moral knowledge. Good, for the Stoic, resides only in virtue and the ruling faculty. Evil resides only in vice and irrational choice. Everything else, health, wealth, pain, death, is indifferent. Wisdom is the skill of correctly applying judgment to distinguish these things. It's the ability to navigate the world without making mistakes about what really matters.
The second pillar is justice. We discussed the hive and bee analogy, but how does the emperor define justice in daily practice?
Justice is giving every man his due and maintaining honesty. It's the social virtue. Marcus insists that if a thing is not good for the hive, it is not good for the bee. So justice means acting according to the rational, social nature of man.
It's about how you act with others.
Yes. It means telling the truth, ensuring fairness in all transactions and interactions. He says, with all thy soul to do justice and to say the truth. Justice requires acting rightly even when no one is looking, because the act itself is the only reward.
The third is fortitude, courage, endurance. Given his life battling wars and plague, this was clearly a virtue Marcus had to embody daily.
Absolutely. Fortitude is the capacity for enduring labor, pain, and fear. It is the ability to face external events, whether physical suffering or public pressure, without allowing those events to compromise the ruling faculty.
It's the mental shield.
It is. It means recognizing that pain is temporary and external, and not an evil unless the mind judges it so. Fortitude allows the rational mind to persevere in its duty regardless of discomfort or danger.
And finally, temperance or moderation. This relates back to our discussion about pleasure versus anger.
It does. Temperance is moderation and self-mastery in all things, controlling appetites, desires, and passions. It's the virtue that ensures the hegemonicon remains in charge, preventing the soul from being dragged around by fleeting sensual desires.
It's internal discipline.
Right. Temperance ensures that we choose only what is necessary, simple, and rational, keeping us far removed from the habits of the rich, just as his mother taught him. It's the internal discipline that makes the other 3 virtues possible.
This philosophical framework, wisdom, justice, fortitude, temperance. It all culminates in his final, simple recipe for security.
The safety of life is this. Examine everything all through. What it is itself, that is, its material, what the formal part, with all thy soul to do justice and to say the truth.
That's the entire operating manual distilled into one sentence.
Pretty much.
So we have journeyed from a simple list of thanks to the acceptance of death, traversing the inner discipline and the social obligations of Stoicism. Let's bring this deep dive to a close by summarizing the modern principles we've extracted from the emperor's private notebook.
We've seen that the path to tranquility, really, is paved by controlling our opinion, recognizing that distress is internal, not external,
Embracing our duty as rational social beings,
forgiving the ignorance of wrongdoers,
and accepting the continuous flux and change of the universe as part of our rational whole.
Yeah.
The ultimate takeaway is a redefinition of true greatness. It does not lie in the trappings of power, as the vulgar believe, or even in sheer intellectual capacity.
No, the source explicitly defines it as residing in the consciousness of an honest purpose in life, founded on a just estimate of himself and everything else, on frequent self-examination, and a steady obedience to the rule which he knows to be right, without troubling himself about what others may think or say.
That is the core directive for modern living, isn't it? Don't waste energy on the external. Fame is dust. Pleasure is fleeting.
Dedicate your energy only to what is just and pure, and what is within the command of your own ruling faculty.
As we conclude, let's leave you with the ultimate question of citizenship that Marcus posed to himself. He observed that when a man separates himself from the whole social system, by hatred, by injustice, by self-inflicted harm, it is a unique privilege given by nature that it is in thy power again to unite thyself.
You can come back. You can rejoin the whole.
And we are constantly faced with a choice every day, every interaction. Do we allow ourselves to be fragments, consumed by external disturbances, anger, and desire, which separates us from the rational whole?
Or do we activate our rational faculty, the divinity within, to rejoin that whole, fully embracing our role as a citizen of the world?
The answer is found in one final instruction, perhaps the most action-oriented challenge in all his thoughts.
In everything you do, ask yourself, what does man's nature require?
And do that without turning aside. If you can maintain that honest purpose, applying wisdom, justice, fortitude, and temperance, you will be free.
A philosophical life is not just thinking about good things. It is doing them continually until the very end.
A powerful note to end on. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the mind and operating system of Marcus Aurelius.